morning. I've been reminded by some of our friends here about how Michelle Obama handles hecklers. So I am ready. I'm ready. I know. All right, so, I have been in Detroit since 2008, but I'm not a Detroit native. I spent the prior 6 years working for a Seattle-based fundraising, consulting, and training firm, and traveling to the U.S. and Canada, leading workshops on how to create sustainable funding. And every year, with that organization, we trained over 4,000 different organizations around North America in a specific fundraising model. And as the time went on, and as the economy in the U.S. got more and more difficult, I really saw that the new fundraising economy really called for new fundraising strategies. And so I really began thinking, all right, there's a model here that, from my employer, that I can't deviate from, and yet, from my reading and my experiences, I think there's more. I think there's opportunity for innovation. I think there's opportunity to ideate and create something transformational. So I began thinking of all the wonderful cities. By the way, at this time I became an empty nester, right? So those of you who have gone through the empty nest, you get a little crazy. So in the fall of 2000, I did. So in the fall of 2008, I started my own company. I got 2 puppies, and I moved to Detroit. I chose Detroit out of all the cities that I had led workshops in, coached groups in, because number one, I think there's a heart in Detroit, in the Detroit region, there's just a heart. There's a heart to really make a difference and to make a change. And I feel like the people that I've had the blessing to know are all in. They're completely committed to the transformation of Detroit. And I think that another reason that Detroit was the perfect sandbox for fundraising innovation was simply because there's no one arguing that transformation is necessary. Right? So there's little resistance, and there's, I think, a higher percentage of folks who are willing to embrace change. So I moved to Detroit and had a contract a couple days of the week at the Children's Center, and then, as Denise said, I moved into a 2.5-year contract with United Way. So I got a home right around 9 Mile, and every day I would make the trek down Woodward Avenue, and I would begin noticing graffiti, on many of the buildings, through Highland Park, through that whole area. And it was really inspiring graffiti. Now, graffiti can really be viewed, I think, in 2 different ways. One, it can be viewed as vandalism, right? Which it is. But 2, it can also be viewed, I think, as creative expression. And so the graffiti that I saw there, that I stopped and took pictures of, and I want to share with you today, I think is creative expression. I think that these messages, which they're not traditional graffiti, they're I think, the pure representation of what Detroit's been going through. Because they're on scraps of cardboard, remnants of paint, kind of painted on this urban canvas, this decayed canvas that has become part of our region. And so from that experience, I began to really see that everything I really know about fundraising, indeed, I did learn in Detroit. So when I came in 2008, when I moved to Detroit, I want to present you some of the statistics. So my welcoming committee, based on the U.S. Census Bureau, and I'm going to read these to you, I'm going to get them right. These are the statistics that we were all living with in the metro area. Between 2006 and 2008, the population within Metro Detroit went from 2 million to about 911,000. In 2010, the median income in the U.S. was $60,888. In the state of Michigan, the median income was $48,700. And in the city of Detroit, it was $29,447. In 2009, the unemployment rate was 29%. And in 2011, only 88% of Detroiters have a bachelor's degree. So it's the perfect sandbox, right? The need is great, the opportunities are many, and that's the context in which we've all been fundraising, which explains why we're all tired. But I think that the opportunity is there. So it's very clear that money is a problem. So I feel like the gap gaps, the money gaps, the gaps in community needs, the statistics that I just shared, they can break our hearts. But in the hands of a skilled fundraiser, those kind of statistics can be a powerful tool. It's really up to us to quantify the need, to make powerful statements, to really raise awareness about what the need is, and not in a general sense. I think in the old fundraising economy, it was enough to say, children are hungry. I think in the new fundraising economy, we have to say 1 in 5 children don't know where their second or third meals are going to come from in our region, right? To begin to quantify the need. And that's really the #1 lesson that I learned from fundraising in Detroit, is the need to quantify the need. Donors are demanding transparency. They're demanding outcomes, not just outputs. At the Children's Center, we used to talk about we're serving 7,500 children and families each year. That's an output. It doesn't really talk about what's the outcome because they were served. What is the ripple effect on academic achievement and therefore workforce development? Right? So it's really up to us to quantify the need in a way that creates a compelling case for support. Courage. This was the second lesson that I really learned, courage. I feel like the most successful nonprofit organizations that I've had the privilege of working with are very, very courageous. They declare bold outcomes. I'll give you an example. And really, a lot of examples today are going to come from the United Way. It was, again, after 2.5 years, it's been my largest experience in the city of Detroit. So at United Way, they have a very, very courageous board and a very courageous CEO in Michael Brennan. And so a few years ago, they did, with the help of McKinsey, they did a study to really identify what were the greatest needs in Metro Detroit. And they determined that it was really around workforce development. So education, stabilizing families so that kids could actually go to school, and not just stopping the hemorrhaging of high school dropouts, but making certain that kids were ready to learn when they should have at kindergarten. Therefore, kind of not just plugging the dam, so to speak, but actually building a new dam, right, to hold back the floodwaters. So they were courageous enough to say they were going to, they created a BHAG, right, to make Detroit a top 5 city to live and work by the year 2030. Now that's courageous. And they had a plan, a strategy for how to deliver on that with specific measurable outcomes. So I'm just saying that courage is absolutely necessary. So declaring bold outcomes. And this really is a board conversation. I mean, this is not something that could be completely staff-driven. You need that board buy-in in order to declare these outcomes. And believe me, I've taken this concept and work with organizations all around the country in declaring their own bold outcomes. So, for example, I've got a domestic violence organization in North Dakota, and their goal is to virtually eliminate violence in their community by 2028. And they have specific goals around eliminating violence in the home, in the school, and in the community. Their board is bought in. Law enforcement is bought in. They're doing a lot of prevention education around violence and conflict resolution in the schools. So, declaring bold outcomes and then having a plan to actually deliver on them. The next graffiti image that I saw said, "Seek knowledge." And it really rang true for me as a valuable lesson for all of us as fundraisers when I was talking with a board member. And this board member was a retired military strategist, brilliant guy. And he simply said, "What got us here won't get us there." Which is simple but powerful. We have to get out of our own way, right? As a friend of mine used to say, "Tammy, get out of your head, it's a bad neighborhood." Right? We've got to seek knowledge from experts in our region, experts outside of our region. If we're really going to stem the pain and create transformational fundraising and strategies and transformational outcomes in our community. So we absolutely have to create new strategies and to bring in the best experts that we can, to go to communities where they have created similar transformations, or to bring together, again, the power of our community, to recruit subject matter experts in the area of finance, in the area of academic achievement, in the area of workforce development. Whatever the core elements of your case for support, you need to bring that caring community together, whether it's in a task force, whether it's in a committee, whether it's in some kind of an ad hoc group of folks to help us seek knowledge and create new strategies that are going to have us really deliver on our mission and those bold outcomes that we've declared. Feel the passion. This was a very interesting piece of work because I really believe in the power of storytelling. So when I saw this piece of graffiti, I thought, yes, the power of storytelling. So I want to tell you a story that I think underscores this lesson. And then to me, this is the most important lesson out of all of them. Together, collectively, they do create transformation, but I think this one is the cornerstone. So during my work with United Way, and as Denise said, I was brought in specifically on a 2.5-year contract to help transform how they engage corporations, employee giving campaigns. And it was quite an experience. So the old fundraising model with United Way, and they will admit this, was very transactional, right? It was fill out your employee pledge card, no worries, we'll wait while you do that, right? It was a lot of maybe a little strong arming, right? A little arm twisting kind of fundraising. So the goal was to move it from transactional to relational. The goal was to move it from obligation giving to really inspire giving. And so we created strategies to actually engage people in the work. Started with a tour. If people got engaged by that, it could be a volunteer opportunity. So in other words, you've got to not only tell the stories of the people that's lives are being changed, or the communities who are being transformed through your work, but you have to give those donors an opportunity to be part of the story. So I'll share with you, it was in June of 2009, no, June of 2010, actually, that we were calling on General Motors. Mark Rice, the North American president of General Motors. And one of the United Way resources, tactics that's been age-old, is to make what we call a CEO call. So it's where the CEO of United Way, Michael Brennan, amazing leader, and another, usually a campaign cabinet or a board CEO or board leader, make a call on another CEO. And traditionally, it was more about, will you run a campaign? Yeah, great, see you next year. Now, this particular call, the board member, the campaign cabinet chair, who was Jeff Bergeron, managing partner of Ernst & Young. And let me just pause and say, if you're going to do major gift fundraising, transformational gifts, you have to have volunteer leadership. You cannot do it successfully without powerful volunteer leadership. And I'm telling you, Jeff Bergeron, I don't think there's a more powerful volunteer on the face of the planet. Amazing, passionate, fearless, committed. So he called the office, made the appointment. I always get the question, how did you get the appointment? The volunteer made the appointment. So we walked in, it was Mike Brennan, the CEO, Jeff Bergeron, our campaign chair, and myself, Senior Director of Corporate Relations. And we were graciously walking into Mark Rice's office. We sat down, and small talk, and then he said, you know, listen, I know that you want us to run a campaign. I know how this goes. We'll run a campaign, but you probably know we're in bankruptcy, right? So we're not going to be making a corporate gift. We've laid off a lot of our employees, and frankly, their morale is pretty low. So we'll ask them to make a gift, and we'll just see what happens. Is there anything else? And he was far more gracious than that. He's a very gracious man, but that was kind of the essence of it, because again, that legacy of how those visits usually went. And Mike Brennan was so brilliant. He said, well, thank you. You know, thank you so much for being willing to run a campaign in the face of all of these challenges. I can only imagine what it's like to sit in your chair. But we're not here to talk about campaign. We're not actually here to talk about money at all. We're here to talk about our work. You see, we have made a big, hairy, audacious goal. And we need the community to help us deliver on this goal. And the goal is to make Detroit a top 5 city to live and work by 2030. And we came to you specifically because the transformation that you're creating in the face of such scarcity inside GM is exactly what we're trying to do in the community through the work of United Way. Your brilliance, your strategy, your insights will be instrumental in helping us turn our work and turn this community. And so you can imagine Mark was pretty surprised, right? So he said, top 5 city. How exactly are you going to do that? And we talked through those strategies. We actually had a 11 by 14 placemat, if you will, a visual case for support that spelled out those strategies. How we were going to move high school graduation rates from less than 60% to 80% or greater by 2018. How we were going to move kindergarten readiness from less than 50% currently to 80% or greater by 2018. How we were going to increase access to healthy, nutritious foods for children, triple it by 2015. And then some other strategies around moving people from a negative net worth, moving them from poverty into a positive net worth through education and job skill development. Strategies. And actually, we had been on this work for a couple of years. So we had some piloted success, measurable outcomes, not outputs, outcomes. And he said, this is really, I'm intrigued. I'd like to be a part of this. The one ask coming out of that meeting was come to our offices. We want you to see the work a little more up close and personal. Now, you know United Way, right? We don't really do a lot of hands-on, frontline service. We typically deliver services through partners, agencies in the old model. And still that remains, and yet we bring other resources and paid partners, high school turnaround specialists that we hire to come in and support these schools as a part of our initiatives. I still talk about them like our, but you get the point. So he said, okay, I'll come to your offices. So about 6 weeks later, we had an appointment for him to come to his office with some of his people. And, you know, we wanted this to be a casual kind of conversation, but you all know behind the scenes it was orchestrated like a space shuttle launch, right? We knew exactly what door he was being dropped off at. We had the General Motors 211 help desk car, 211 on the road. Any of you familiar with 211 at United Way? They have a 211 help center. People, more than 400,000 people call each year, calling for basic help, basic needs help, helping them connect to utility assistance or child care or vaccinations, all kinds of things, prescriptions, if they can't provide them for themselves. And so we, at United Way, also has then a couple of cars that were donated by Roger Penske that happen to be General Motors cars, fortunately, in this case, that go out into communities where we know homeless people congregate to provide those services, to pull out a laptop out of the trunk and begin providing those services right there on the spot. So we had that car parked strategically so he'd see that GM, that beautiful GM logo on the front of that car. He came in. We immediately brought him over to the 211 help desk. We had him sign a letter of confidentiality, and we put him on with the headphones on the call. So he was listening in and really beginning to understand what it's like for some of the people who call in. So after about 5 minutes of Mark listening, and as he listened, by the way, his head kept getting lower and lower and lower, and the tip of his nose was getting a little pink, and you could tell he was being moved. I mean, you guys may not know what, we ladies will sometimes shed a tear. You men will hold them back, but your nose and your ears turn pink. It's your giveaway. So I saw that he was really engaged and moved. And so after about 5 minutes, we only had an hour with him, about 5 minutes, I tried to wave him away. It's like, just a minute. He wanted to hear what happened at the end of that call. So as he wrapped up and he came toward us, I said, what was the story you heard? He said, this senior citizen in Hamtramck, for the last 3 months, he's had to choose between his prescriptions and his rent. And today he came home and locks are changed on his apartment. Can't get in. His prescriptions, his classes, everything he owns is in there. He needs help. Yeah, $400,000 costs a year. Let's continue the conversation. So we went into the kind of the war room, which is, if you haven't been on a tour of United Way, you absolutely must go. It's an extraordinary tour. It really is an amazing tour. And there's a room there that has all the flip chart paper with the stats and the goals and the what's next and the ideation. It's a creation war room. And so we sat down and we began talking through each of those strategies. And we noticed that Mark really gravitated to high school graduation rates, right? The high school turnaround efforts. He asked a lot of questions, a lot of tough questions. We knew most of the answers. We didn't know all the answers. We were completely transparent about that. We even talked about what our problems were. Like, yeah, we have success here. We had these 5 schools, and within those 5 schools that we've been in for 2 years, that freshman class and now that sophomore class, 86% of them are on track to graduate. But there are 30 other dropout factories in the region. And that's a term that was given to us by the U.S. Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan. And so he was intrigued, and we talked about our problems. And the more we talked about our problems, it got really transparent. The more he talked about his problems, it got really transparent. He said, you know, at GM, we've lost our soul. We've forgotten who we were. Our employees, their morale is so low. They're doing the jobs of 3 and 4 or 5 of their former colleagues. So we began talking about how can philanthropy solve business problems? How can employee volunteerism rejuvenate teams? Give them a sense of purpose. Give them a sense of pride in their employer because they're giving back with whatever they have, in spite of what they don't have. We began talking about how investment in social causes can also increase consumer affinity. And it's well documented around how corporate social responsibility has a positive impact on consumerism as well as employee loyalty and employee attraction and acquisition. So we began talking through those and telling those stories and sharing. And at the end of that meeting, we didn't ask for money. The one ask was, you seem especially intrigued by our high school work. Why don't you come to one of our high schools? He said, okay, I'll do that. But at the end of that tour of the high school, I want to see a proposal for what it would take to turn around 5 more schools. We said, well, thank you, but I have to say, you know, you can't just invest in a school for 1 year. This is a 5-year commitment. It takes a year just to do the planning and have the schools apply, because they have to have skin in the game. They have to want this transformation. So it takes a year to set that all up. And then we start with the freshman class, and then the freshman and sophomore class, and then the junior class, and then the senior class, until we actually close that school and reopen these 4 academies or the new transform school. So it's a 5-year commitment. And in addition to that, it's not enough to stop the hemorrhaging of high school dropouts. We have to do prevention work. We have to get into the community and work with these 3, 4, 5-year-olds, this early childhood education, in a way that really has kids show up to kindergarten ready to learn, to create those successful adults by age 5. And he said, okay, all right, we'll put it all in the proposal, whatever it's going to take. I said, we'll add the employee volunteers and pieces. What are the opportunities of the menu? He said, do it. And call my people, we'll get a date. So it was about September 19th, 2010, came on the tour. And when he walked into the school, we did a tour of some of the classrooms. And then we walked into kind of a private area, like a teacher's lounge. And it was there that he met 3 students. And they told their stories. One little girl, I think, especially captured his heart. And I say little because she was not even 5 foot tall. But I tell you, her spirit was enormous. She was a powerhouse. Her name was Destiny. And she talked about how much she loves this school and how she was so apprehensive to come to the school when she was a freshman because 7 kids had been shot in front of it when school let out the year before. And she lives right in that neighborhood. And so she said, I didn't want to come to Cody High School. I was scared to come to Cody High School. But they came door to door and they were telling our family, that something had changed. And so I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. And my mom said, okay, let's try it out. She said, so I started my freshman year last year. And within like the first semester, I had some conflict with my mom and she put me out. So I went across town to live with my dad, and that didn't work out either, so I ended up living with my aunt. And it takes me 4 bus rides, about an hour and 15 minutes to get to school every morning. Mark's like, well, why do you just go to school in your new community? She said, well, you don't understand. At this school, they know my name. If I don't show up, they're calling. They care about me. Like, this is my family. Now, she's crying. I'm crying. There's not a dry eye in the room. There's such a powerful testimony. All 3 of them were. Kids went to class. Principals shared their stories about why they do this work, working 16, 18 hours a day. Their amazing commitment to this school, to these children, was extraordinary. And then principals went away, and we had the great privilege of walking Mark and his team through the proposal. Now again, at every one of these meetings, I had the CEO, Mike Brennan, we had the chair, the campaign chair, Jeff Bergeron, and myself, and we would bring other people in and out, the education experts as needed. But again, I just want to reinforce the importance of having that CEO and that volunteer leader at every one of those major gift cultivation opportunities. Critically important to your success. And to share those stories, not only to share them verbally, but to have your major donor prospects be a part of the experience, that this story becomes their story. Not a story they heard, a story they felt, they experienced. So, as we sat down, Jeff, the volunteer, gave some context. I had the privilege of walking Mark through that proposal line by line by line. Each of the schools, how would they be selected? What time frame? What were the challenges of that community? Where were all the schools? Where were the GM plants where volunteers would naturally be located in that area? How would the early childhood communities come around? Line by line with a dollar figure. And at the end, Mike Brennan said, so we're asking you to make a $27.1 million investment in United Way to transform education and ultimately workforce development. So, silence. And Mark is looking at it. He's nodding his head, and he's nodding his head, and he's nodding his head. And he looks up and he says, let's do it. And then he said, I have no idea how we're going to do it. But let's do it. And then there was more silence, because we had never rehearsed what to say when he said yes. Won't let that happen again. But then I said, thank you. Thank you. This is a day we will never forget. And I can't wait to be sitting with you on the front row 5 years from now when we see that first student walk across the stage and get their high school diploma with a bright future ahead of them. So, stories. You have to tell the story and let the donor be part of the story. Critically important to your success. Assume nothing. All right, so this is a shameless confession to 200 people. In my role as Senior Director of Corporate Relations, we of course had a very rigorous projections process at the beginning of each fiscal year to really project what was the revenue we projected from our corporate partners. And I will tell you, now I realize that I made a lot of assumptions. And maybe some of you will see yourselves in this, probably not, you're all much more astute than I. But I assumed that if a donor gave this much last year, they're going to give that much this year. In fact, I could probably, because I'm so brilliant, increase it. What I discovered through this whole process was stewardship is the price you pay for those kinds of assumptions, right? You can make those assumptions when you are stewarding, when you are cultivating. But the old model of thank you for your gift, see you next year, it doesn't go very well, work out so great with an assumptive attitude around the projections for the following year's gift. So, banishing entitlement. I literally had a corporate partner that had given $700,000 the year before. And I thought, it's been a tough year. I'm going to downgrade it to 500, and then I'll exceed 500,000. And then I'll exceed my goal, right? They came in at 200,000. Now imagine my distress at that moment, like how am I going to make that up, right? And it was mirror, we could see ourselves in that in some scenarios. So banishing entitlement is key to your long-term success. Weathering the storm. All right, so this is one of the most important things I ever learned from Mike Brennan. So Mike has really led the embrace of, United Way's cultural embrace of Jim Collins. How many of you have read Good to Great? Or you've read Great by Choice? So chapter 3, Great by Choice, right? Talks about the 20-mile march. And Mike talks about this all the time, right, Jeannie? Yes. So he talks about the 20-mile march. And for those of you who don't know the story, in essence, there are two explorers. They're standing on the beach in San Diego with a team. Backpacks, food supplies. They're going to do they're going to do a march from the beaches of San Diego to the tip of Maine. And each of those leaders has a different strategy. One strategy is we've packed as many supplies as we think we'll need, and we're going to be agile. We're going to go with the flow. We're going to go, some days we're going to march 20 miles, but if the weather's good, we might go 40. If the weather's bad, we might hunker in and not move at all that day. We're going to be agile and kind of just see how this works. The other leader took a very disciplined approach. The other leader said, we're going to march 20 miles a day, come rain or shine, no matter what, in the face of all circumstances. So that disciplined approach to what you're going to do, but most importantly, what you're not going to do. We were just talking about this a moment ago. In our world, there are so many things that consume our time that are urgent. Grant application deadline, event deadline, all of these deadlines that drive us. How many of you feel like my calendar runs my life? I don't. Yeah, urgent over important. The important things are thank gifts, cultivating those. The important things are major gifts, right? Relationship kinds of things. They don't have a deadline, so we keep telling ourselves, I'm going to get to that. Oh yeah, fourth quarter. Yeah, fourth quarter. So in Good to Great, this 20-mile march, he talks about creating a stop doing list. What, no kidding, are you going to stop doing to create what you need to do? Those strategic things that will create transformation in your organization. So weathering the storm, really just that piece of graffiti reminded me that we absolutely have to implement disciplined measurement and then track it. Hold yourselves accountable, hold your teams accountable, and give yourself and them the permission to do the stop doing list, which sounds like a brilliant idea right now until you want something done that's not on the list, right? It's not, right? So this would be a breakthrough. If every single person in this room created a stop doing list and stuck to it, I can only venture, I can't even imagine, actually, what would be possible this time next year when we all gather. So, that piece of graffiti, weathering the storm, I think to weather the storm, we have to have disciplined measurement. Okay. Based on honesty. All I want to say is Kwame, right? Or who was the gentleman out east? Bernie Madoff. Madoff. Yeah, he did. I'm never going to forget it now, Jeff. Thank you. He made off with the money. Bernie Madoff. It's so important that we have impeccable ethics in our sector. I think donors are gun shy, and yet they long for someone to believe in. They want to invest. They want to commit. And it's really up to us to create that environment based on ethics and honesty and transparency so that they know we are the place. We are the trusted partner for them to fulfill their legacy, to fulfill their vision, to fulfill their heart's highest calling. We're the partner, and they can trust us. Okay. Let's see. Dreams come true. So I want to tell you this story. It's so amazing. This is the kind of the last chapter in the General Motors story. Dreams do come true. You know, if you had told me in January of 2010 that GM, who was in bankruptcy, would end up making a $27 million gift over 5 years, we would have all had a really good laugh, and you guys would have said, what is that, vodka or water, right? Crazy lady. So we continued. Again, that meeting at Cody High School was on September 19th. And we continued then through the summer and the early fall to continue to refine that proposal. Mark did a lot of inside work with his board of directors, lots of enrollment conversations with the General Motors Foundation, who's been just extremely amazing partner to the United Way. And on December 12th, 2010, there was a press conference held at Cody High School, and it was there that Mark Royce and Destiny together announced the $27.1 million gift, because November of 19th, the GM had gone back on the New York Stock Exchange and had paid back a large portion of that debt. So clearly, you can see that dreams absolutely can and do come true. Okay, so the next two lessons that I want to share with you are really inspired by a video. So I'm going to let the video do the talking here, and then I'll recap. Such a powerful video, and I think largely because they were so humble. And I think that all of us fall down. You know, all of us feel downtrodden, we've made mistakes, and yet to get back up. And so the lesson is to really, number one, be humble and express sincere gratitude. If we did more of that, the results would be incredible. I'm sure many of you, like me, are Penelope Burke data junkies. You know, and she says that of the annual survey she does of over 20,000 different donors across the U.S., the number one thing they say they want to be thanked promptly, sincerely, and told what their gifts helped to accomplish. So if we can thank them promptly, and again, have those measured outcomes that we're sharing with the donors, letting them know what their gifts accomplished, I know our results would grow even faster. And lastly, never, ever, ever give up. Never give up. All right, so top 10, recap. The lessons I learned driving up and down Woodward Avenue reading graffiti. Number one, quantify the need, right? To have, like, what is the need specifically? Not our community is hurting, we need more arts. Quantifying it in a way that's very powerful and gives people something to bite into. Declare bold outcomes. And not just your mission statement, but no kidding. In measurable numbers, what are you accomplishing and why should I care? Create new strategies. What got us here won't get us there. Continually grow and develop. Tell powerful stories and give your donors an opportunity to be a part of the story so that your story becomes their story. Banish entitlement. No kidding. You probably, that stewardship I talked about is probably on your that's important, not urgent. Right? So what are you going to stop doing so you can steward? Stewardship is really, I think it's the what does it mean, get poison? and you have to get the antidote, right? The antidote. So stewardship is the antidote to entitlement. Implement the disciplined measurements. No kidding. What are you going to do? By when? What's it going to produce? What are you going to stop doing so you can do that? Taking a look at what are you doing that you're doing just because it's urgent? And what could you replace that with that's critically important, that would move the needle for you? Ethics, ethics, ethics. You know, really take a look at who you be and who you as an organization are. To your donors, to the community, are you transparent? Are you squeaky clean? Are you going above and beyond to meet all the measures to be that 5-star, guide-star kind of organization? Think big and believe. No kidding. Even in the face of what seems impossible, many, many extraordinary things are possible that would be transformational for you, for this community, for our region. Express sincere gratitude. You know, we've all heard that you have to thank the donor at least 7 times. But I don't know how many of us really do that. Promptly, sincerely, in many different ways. And never, ever, ever give up. Thank you.